see any conflict supporting both.
So your thinking is all of the above thinking,
Yes.
right? Yeah. Okay, Mr. Villa, I want to come to you because your company, Technip Energy, is what I think is where rubber hits the road, right? All the good talk, but you are actually doing stuff. You know, I'm an engineer, and engineers like to do stuff. So give us maybe an example of, you know, where energy efficiency, energy management, all the things you're doing to reduce emissions. Again, the action.
Thank you. I have to share what has been done, said before, to thanks for having invited the industries. In COP26, we felt ourselves a little bit aside, while we need to be integrated. Cooperation, it's key, collaboration. Our company, it's a new incorporated company, 2 years, but with 60 years history. And when we demerged from Technip FMC, it was clear the message we gave to the market. We want to be a player on the energy transition. And we started to invest a lot, to increase the investment. And now we are seeing that all those investments start to concrete materializing. Carbon capture. We are realizing a carbon capture, post-combustion carbon capture plant in Oslo, waste to power plant. You recover 400,000 tons per annum. That is 95% of the emission. And then it will be sequestrated in the Northern Light infrastructure. But what is very, very important on it is not only we are capable to recover 95% reduction, but we emit only 4% for each ton of CO2 reduced. So it's very key. You touch another one, energy efficiency. I want to thank, because, you know, carbon capture, we talk everywhere, carbon capture, it's very fashionable. But we need even to concentrate to reduce the emission, not only to emit and capture. Energy efficiency, we are investing, we are starting to invest a lot on our technologies. An example is in Rotterdam for Shell. We are substituting in their petrochemical complex 16 cracker furnaces with only 8 cracker furnaces, increase energy efficiency, an overall reduction of 10% of the emission of the overall petrochemical complex. Last but not least, energy management. We focus, and everyone, as LB as well, on what it's important is the intermittency when we combine the renewable energies. On this, we have invested a lot, and we have a software that's been able to provide a solution, and for those solutions, we have already tested with certain clients. We can achieve an increase between 15 and 20% of the profitability compared with the traditional one. And if I may last, Egypt. We are fully committed, and we are moving forward a lot even on Egypt. The most important, we have several initiatives, of course, with EDF Renewable for green ammonia. We did a feasibility study, we are moving forward on bioplastic with SIPTech. But what's very, very important, we are working hard. We have done already the feasibility, the screening, feasibility, and we are moving forward in action to implement, with the support of the Ministry of Petroleum and His Excellencies, on decarbonizing Midor refinery. 15 technological opportunities has been selected, coming from feedstock mix, electrification, blue and green hydrogen, the flaring, carbon capture, all these. And now we are working with an integrated joint team with many, many engineers to make implementing this on a phased way. So just to say, we did well to invest. We have seen that those investments start to be materialized in concrete projects, and Egypt is one of the countries where we are committed and we are working hard to make it happen.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the points you're making important for the audience to realize is that every ton of CO2 we don't emit is one less ton of CO2 we have to capture in the future, and a bit. So Jim, you are a newcomer. Sorry, your name was not on the panel. You joined us late, and you're not an oil and gas or industry person. So tell us where you would like the industry to go faster.
Yeah, okay, and I apologize for the uncoordinated IPCC response to your kind invitation. Just to say, I also did speak at the launch of the OGCI in London a few years ago, and I was once president of the UK's Energy Institute and presided over Petroleum Week dinner.
So you're a real expert.
I engage with the industry a lot. So just to say, just a few hard messages maybe to say at the beginning. Our long-term scenarios chapter produces some numbers on where you expect the size of the oil and gas industry to be by 2050. And for 2 degrees warming, the projection is that oil would be down by 30% and natural gas would be down by 15%. And for a 1.5 degree scenario, it is much more challenging, 60% down for oil and 45% for natural gas. I should say this is the average of a lot of different scenarios, and indeed in some of the scenarios, natural gas actually increases by 2050 in a 2 degree scenario. But I think the point we make about that in our energy chapter, it does risk stranded assets in the oil and gas sector, and this would take place by 2050. I have to say it's not the same as the crisis for coal, which comes much more quickly. But what we also do point out is to pick up a lot of the themes that have come in the previous ones, the importance of technology, which may extend the use of oil and gas and reduce the prospect of stranded assets. So we particularly pick out carbon capture and storage as an opportunity. And we flag indeed that this is a mature technology for the oil and gas industry. All the components have been demonstrated. What is lacking is not the technology, it's the policy frameworks and the business models to actually bring it about. So this is an important point we emphasize.
We have His Excellency the Minister coming, and maybe Her Excellency may want to talk about policy, but please finish your thought.
Yeah, and just one more point, the importance of methane. Methane is a short-lived, potent greenhouse gas. And as we expect to go through 1.5 degrees in the early 2030s, the value of methane reductions is extremely high. And we estimate that about 50 to 80% of energy sector methane emissions could be reduced at costs of less than $50 per tonne. So just to echo the messages, I've got the key points over very quickly. I can see you're anxious about time.
No worries. Yeah, I think that, just to emphasize your methane point, because we heard from Her Excellency and also from Olivia, you know, methane, and by the way, there will be a session on methane later on here in a couple of hours. Please come back and listen to that. So, Bernard, we have about 15 minutes. I'm going to ask you to make a very quick interjection. I want to go back with one more quick question for quick answers. Please.
I'm just picking up on methane, because there's also one page in your report, and I think this is a shocking number, because it shows that if the oil and gas industry is able to drive out methane leakages from its industry, the contribution of that compared to others on climate, it's going to be equal to all electric cars in the world by 2030. Have that in mind. So that's the background for why we launched this aiming for zero methane emissions. Basically saying that we believe that this industry should, as Olivia said, change its approach to methane emissions. One of, instead of having incremental change, to one of zero tolerance. One shaped around what would happen to methane if we approach it the same way as this industry is approaching oil spills or safety incidents.
Yeah. So I think we'll come back next year, hopefully, and see where the progress is. Your Excellency, can I come back to you? Because what you said was kind of important, that, you know, the future of energy, at least in your country and perhaps in Africa more broadly, has all of above, you know, oil and gas and renewables and so on. What's your message to this COP for the future, and what's the role you want the industry to play in helping you get to where you want to get to? By industry, I mean oil and gas and other industries. Short answer, please.
Well, thank you very much. I think the world will continue to need the utilization of petroleum, oil, and gas. And therefore, we have to focus on the emission or the utilization. There are other areas in pharmaceuticals everywhere where we need oil and gas. So we will need it. So Uganda is insisting on the journey we took to develop the natural resources responsibly. We have tested the climate change effects by having droughts where we no longer determine the seasons for planting or for harvesting. We have tested that. So we need to be helped as Uganda and as Africa to understand that a transition requires understanding the challenges of the countries so that together we can work on those challenges. Clean energy is not cheap. It's not cheap. It requires investment. There is one thing having that energy in the kitty, distributed it, and one thing affording it. So affordability should not be left behind, and reliability. And lastly, on the new technologies, we need to be assisted by research, non-partisan research, so that we are sure that we will have this power sustainably. Reliability and sustainability is very key in the new technologies that we are bringing on board. So research has to be done, and non-partisan research has to be done so that we are comfortable. Otherwise, all of us want to be energy cities in the world, like Houston. We want to be. So we benchmark, we are learning from our big brothers, and I don't know whether I will be given another opportunity, but if not, I want to use this opportunity to invite you to come to Uganda in May to participate in our East African Petroleum Conference that is going to take place next year in May 2023.
Let us hope you get a very large audience. Thank you, Your Excellency. Mr. Denny, I want to come to you next because, you know, so far this COP, money has been number one or number two, depending on how you look at it. So what's your thinking? Are we going to see more money, which is needed both for mitigation but also for adaptation?
Yeah, the preceding panel before this one, we heard that money is available. But the reality is that Africa needs about 277 billion US dollars annually to finance climate. And currently we are only getting 10% of that. So the money is really not there. So financial institutions such as ourselves will need to be providing the financing that our member countries need to adapt to the climate issues. Now, if you look at the emissions caused by shipping raw materials from Africa to Europe, America, or China, and then shipping back processed, that's a lot of emissions. So if we can all support the implementation of the AFCTA to enable production to take place locally within Africa and for trade to take place within the continent, it will reduce a lot of greenhouse emissions.
Yeah, the idea of circular economy, very important. Olivier, can you go back to the question about innovation, right? So you're a big innovation company. What's your vision, and some of it locally here in Africa, maybe?
So no, I think first I would say that most of the technology we need can address already a long way in decarbonization for oil and gas. And I think if we were to take the methane, we're not lacking technology. We're lacking a global framework and agreeing to first measure and certify our emissions and understand where they're coming from and doing the measurements. And then we can address the abatement of those methane leaks. So leaks or venting or disposition. So I think policy and having a way to measure and report it, a digital platform, a digital sustainability platform as we are launching, I think is something that we believe we need. Now, going beyond this, key challenge, key gaps that we could consider. I think the first one, is certainly capture. Capture technology that have the economics to be able to address the low concentration CO2 streams so that it can be used at scale economically and it can be getting a return. The second, I would say, electrification. This industry has an opportunity to electrify. Fully electrified field development, existing or green field development so that it is, first, we can green it, we can eliminate emission from the power side, but also it can extract more efficiency, more digital control, more automation, and more recovery, to your point. And last, I would say that the industry needs to address its use of certain resource, certain raw material, from cement to steel alloys, that I think we need to invent a circularity economy here to better use this and do some sector coupling so that we eliminate and go for zero cement, we go for zero carbon cement, we go for zero carbon steel dedicated to our industry. If we do these three things, we address the gaps and I think we can scale.
Yeah, so sector coupling is also very important. Can I come back to you for the last question? Historically, there was a big tussle between OPEX and CAPEX. Don't spend too much CAPEX because that's what the management wants. Is that changing now? Because sometimes you have to spend more money to get the benefit down the road.
It's completely changed the approach. Now is the key issues that we will discuss with all the customers. And, but all are open to go deeply to see all the benefits. You know, we were used to came from a sector that was only CAPEX, CAPEX, CAPEX. Your investment, lowest price. Now, we have an example on the clean hydrogen, then blue, green, whatever you want. Let's call it clean hydrogen. The levelized cost of ownership is to find out the best combination between CAPEX and OPEX. And this is where we are working a lot. As well, we are constructing now in the Middle East, 4 mega LNG in Qatar. The project started the FEED started in 2019. At that time, we immediately see which was the benefit on having a reduced emission of CO2. And now, he has a unit of carbon capture that will reduce 25% the emission of this first train. And it will be the biggest carbon capture unit in the world. Just to say that it's here that most of the people start to think which is the best benefit among the two. And now is the most important question and the most important challenge that we have with all the customers. Just to leave it, it was in the presentation of Osama, he said collaboration and digitalization. Digitalization will help a lot on this finding out the levelized cost of ownership. Because with the digital twin, the virtual representation of assets, utilizing, uploading real data on real time, machine learning, artificial intelligence, all the tools we have, simulation, we can really find out the best solution between CAPEX and OPEX.
Yeah, I know from my experience working in the industry that what gets measured gets done. So measurement, measurement, measurement. We need to do that. Jim, I'm going to give you the last word. After you heard all of the panelists, does it make you optimistic or pessimistic?
I am perpetually optimistic. I mean, I do see the solutions out there. We scientists can send out very gloomy messages about doom, and perhaps my colleagues in working groups 1 and 2 of IPCC on physical science and impacts take us in that direction. In working group 3, we see, in mitigation, we see ourselves as the solutions working group. So optimism is part of the CV requirements for the job, I think. Yes, I'm optimistic.
Thank you, Jim, and I want to thank this outstanding panel. So please join me in thanking this group. We are going to go straight into the next session. So again, if you want to leave, beautiful weather outside, go and enjoy that. If you want to stay, find a seat. In 2 minutes, we start the next session. you're good? Thank you. All right. I will. Yeah. Your Excellency, thank you so much for coming. And yourself, sir. Thank you very much. Yes. Again, could I get people to sit down? And if you want to leave, you're very welcome to leave, but we need to start. Could we get everybody to take a seat, please? We are starting now. So everybody who has been here for all morning, thank you for your participation and attention. Again, please find a seat or you can leave. Okay, so we're going to stay on with this theme of action and implementation. So earlier in the morning, in the video, you heard about the East Mediterranean Gas Forum. We're going to talk about what that forum is and what is it doing to deal with emissions from the gas value chain. That's our plan for this EMGF session. So what we're going to do is we are going to have a presentation first, and then we will follow up with a panel discussion. So first a presentation and then a panel discussion on the EMGF project. So with that, can I invite Your Excellency Osama Mubarak to come and start the presentation.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you very much. Yes. People are very excited.
Could we get the panelists to sit in the front? And as soon as His Excellency has finished the presentation, we will have the panelists come up. Thank you.
Thank you, Atul. Thank you very much. I see that everyone is excited about the discussions from the Decarbonization Day. So, I understand that we have a very tight schedule and a very busy day. So, I will not take too much in the presentation. I will, first I'm very happy to welcome you all to the Decarbonization Day and to this session about the EMGF Decarbonization Initiative. I will try in the coming few minutes very briefly to introduce the initiative that we have and also give some time more for the panel discussion. So first, I just would like to thank our esteemed supporters and partners that helped us with this initiative, the EU, the World Bank, and also our content partners, S&P and Bechtel, and also the Gas Industry Advisory Committee, as well as the contribution from the US Chamber of Commerce. So first thing is that I would like to highlight and ensure that the EMGF is very committed to the decarbonization and the climate action. We have already endorsed our long-term strategy. In the last ministerial meeting, we had 7 strategic objectives. One of those strategic objectives is talking about energy transition and climate action. And we are trying through this long-term strategy to strike the right balance between energy security and energy transition. So, and I think what is different maybe about this initiative of the EMGF is that it is not coming from one stakeholders, it is integrated, it is collaboration between the governments, the private sector, the industry, the GIAC, and also some of the technology providers in the GIAC. We have been working on this very extensively in the past 10 months, and the draft report is completed. It will be discussed in detail at the Egyptian Pavilion in the next hour. And the reports eventually have 2 main goals. One is talking about a plan over the next 6 to 8 years of how can we decarbonize the facilities of the gas industry in the region. And the second goal is how can we provide, or how can the governments provide the policies and the regulations necessary to implement this plan. So we have been trying to do this through 4 main pillars: policies and regulations, financing, technologies, and capacity building. I'm sure this is not new to all of you. Anyone talking about decarbonization have these 3 or 4 main pillars in mind. So also maybe what we tried to do also in the initiative is that how can the EMGF as an international and regional organization support this plan, whether support the governments in developing the regulations and policies or support the companies. And in this regard, we have 5 main roles for the EMGF. First is policy harmonizer. How can we align between the different policies of the governments? Second, carbon certification, as carbon trade is very important for the decarbonization, and it has its ups and downs, and it's not widespread. So EMGF has a role to play to develop carbon certification for the region and maybe beyond this. The third point is financial consultants, because funding is very important for the decarbonization. So how can the EMGF play a role in this? The fourth one is knowledge aggregator. There is a lot of know-how, a lot of technologies, and we believe the EMGF can play a role in aggregating this. The last one is technical advisor to the governments and also supporting the link between the governments and the private sector at the JIC. So I think this is the last slide I have. I tried very briefly to introduce the initiative, and I'm very excited for the panel.
Thank you, Secretary General. So could I now invite my panelists to come up to the stage, starting with Your Excellency Tarek Al-Molla, Minister for Petroleum and Mineral Resources. Her Excellency Natasha Pilides from Minister of Energy and Commerce and Industry from Cyprus. Mr. Claudio Descalzi, CEO of ENI. Claudio. Ms. Pratima Rangarajan, CEO of the OGCI Climate Investments, and Mr. Riccardo Politi, Vice President for Infrastructure at the World Bank. So please find a seat anywhere, and of course, Secretary General Mubarak. So let me kind of explain what is going to happen in the next kind of 50 minutes, because we have a little tight schedule. So as Secretary General said in the presentation, This will be a strategic discussion around the initiative and what it aims to do. There'll be a more nuts and bolts discussion right after this in the Egyptian pavilion. So you will see a few of the panelists leave about 5 minutes before the top of our session. So they are leaving not because they're angry with me, but they have to go to the other session. Maybe they're angry with me, but let's find that out. So I want to start with you, Your Excellency, Minister Al-Maula. Tell us about your vision for this initiative. You know, cooperation is not the word which comes to mind to everybody these days with so many conflicts. Why this initiative? What's your vision for it?
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody here in this room. And I have to welcome our panelists. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being with us. Well, EMGF now is a reality, and as you see now, we're having this important sessions and discussions. EMGF is part of the globe and is part of the challenges that we are facing now. When we started a few years back, and perhaps through the few slides that Osama had presented, I think that we thought on how to show the EMGF as an ideal consortium or an ideal forum together where we prioritize the decarbonization into our operations. Why is that? Because we have started already through this forum to select our energy, which is gas, natural gas, as we have all agreed that is the least fuel emission and acceptable hydrocarbon as a transition hydrocarbon for our future transitioning period. Hence, we decided to have, through the strategy and hiring up our consultants in order to get this study there. We need to work together for decarbonization, and I think that we had proven over the last couple of years that we have good and fully integrated countries. I think that you have seen that the East Mediterranean region has proven the concept of cooperation. And when we talk about cooperation, part of that is that we need to be responsible before our people and our economies. Hence, we spoke about decarbonizing our facilities and our operations. So our vision is that to be a role model, not only what we have proved to be, which is the integration and the how we complement each other between producing countries and consuming countries, regional countries, transient countries. Not only that, we had together, and as we have seen over here in the panel, through what we call the GIAC, which is the Gas Industry Advisory Committee. So we have integrated governments with companies, different stakeholders, plus we have the World Bank with us, in addition to other observers like the EU and the United States. So we need to have an ideal coalition where we prove before everybody that we can still produce gas but with less emissions, and we can still produce this kind of transition energy with less emissions. So I think that we have made the stage clear, and we are advancing so much. We have big enthusiasm, and we have a big buy-in from different stakeholders, and I think we are speeding up to demonstrate all this together. Lastly, but I have to highlight this, that perhaps over one of our meetings, and this was on the 15th of June, we had also with us the EU, presented by President von der Leyen, to witness the cooperation between our region and the EU for natural gas. So this shows that the EU is depending and believing in what we are going to bring to Europe as a transition while having lower and less emissions with our LNG cargoes that we send. Thank you.
So I'm now starting to get another word besides action, which is collaboration. We've heard this idea of collaboration so far this morning. Minister Pilides, you want to develop gas in Cyprus, but also decarbonization. So tell us how these two goals come together.
Thank you. Yeah, not an easy challenge, especially under the circumstances. As we've heard in many of these panels, the challenge is how to keep going with decarbonization whilst securing, obviously, enough energy for everybody at reasonable prices. And it's not proving a very easy task. So I think, as dear Tarek said just now, we need to be looking at the EastMed as a potential solution to this problem, both in terms of the price, but also in terms of the environmentally sustainable development that has been streamlined, especially through the EMGF and initiatives like carbon capture and initiatives like moving towards cleaner fuel. And it's very, very crucial in collaborating to bring the region together, because the EU has some very ambitious goals. Those goals are not necessarily agreed upon by everybody. And so it's great to have an organization which is not only looking at these issues, it's very proactive in vocalizing them, in studying them. We have been discussing a number of initiatives through our working groups, but also through future potential initiatives that we will be introducing in order to make sure that natural gas can play a part in a sustainable way. I would say that the EU has started to recognize and vocalize the fact that companies need certainty, and that they need certainty over a long period of time. If we want the EU to become independent of Russian gas, then that means that they have to offer something to companies which is viable and secure. And we had the opportunity to meet the EU Commissioner in her recent visit to Cyprus in October. She saw each one of the consortia that we have in Cyprus, including Eni, and the discussion was along those lines, that contracts can be signed up until 2049, the end of 2049. There seems to be quite a lot of interest, because we've been approached by different countries of the EU and wider European area asking about our plans and whether they can be part of our plans.
Yeah, thank you. So we are learning that you can't have energy transition without energy security, and this is an example of where the East Mediterranean gas can provide that security. Mr. Descalzi, now you have a goal to be net zero by 2050. You're also a very large producer of gas and increasing production. So how do you kind of square that circle? More gas, net zero, and the role of gas more broadly?
To everything. So, no, I think that when we talk about pillar for our society and for the present and the future, environmental sustainability is the crucial pillar, but we have also other pillars that, as we said, as the ministers said, is energy security. That is a clear, not just a clear effect of the war, but the war clearly stressed this point. I talk for Europe, but then the impact is worldwide, but also because we did invest in the last 8 years. Clearly, gas can be sustainable and can accompany the energy transition at some conditions. First of all, we have to reduce methane emissions, and that is a crucial point, because through methane emission we produce about we release 100 million ton of methane. Now is reducing, and we produce a huge amount CO2 or GHG, because it's CO2 and methanes, and so it's very, very tough situation. And flaring is another point. So I think that gas can be accepted in the transition. First of all, because it's still one of the main actors after coal in the electricity. So coal is still the first one, 37%, producing 72% of the GHG emissions and fine dust and other stuff. So coal is still the leader, unfortunately. Gas is the second one, but we can accept gas only if we are able to clean up all the losses, waste, and pollution that gas can generate as a byproduct, because it's not also very clever to flare methane instead of use for different kind of means. I think that for gas is important. The minister talked about carbon capture. For the hard-to-abate system that use gas, that is essential. That is another way to clean up the use of gas. And we have, as we are doing with the minister in Egypt, to focalize the replacement of gas. That is a very precious vector, energy vector. We're renewable. So what we are doing now is trying to replace in our internal combustion. So when we generate electricity for our installation, we use renewable to reduce the impact and give the possibility for Egypt to sell this gas to Europe, in this case for the energy security. So the role of gas is clear, but we have to put conditions. Otherwise, we generate too much pollution and emissions.
Yeah, I think the one consistent theme has been this morning that there is gas is there needed. We need to reduce methane emissions, as you say, and also operationally we need to reduce flaring and reduce the use of energy, use clean energy. So, Mr. Politi, I want to come to you, and if you can tell us about the role of the, what does the World Bank see as the role of gas, particularly in the emerging and developing economies? And you heard from the minister from Uganda earlier this morning.
Absolutely. Good afternoon to everybody. Thank you to the Egyptian government. Gas has a role in the just energy transition. It is undeniable. Think about, as it was just mentioned, helping to exit from more polluting fuels like coal in power generation, making the grid more stable, and in that way making sure that we can shoe in renewables in a quicker way. The use of gas, for example, in house needs, for example, replacing LPG canisters and all the rest. So there is a use. Of course, it will be different region to region, country to country, depending on the endowment and always on the context of an energy transition towards renewables. But there is a role for gas without any problem. So what we have to think now is how to make sure that we use gas in a proper way. And in that case, I think we must act forcibly in order to make it as clean as possible. So if we assume we need it, let's make it clean. For example, I found that the practice of venting or flaring, it is fully unacceptable. I can tell you that if all the gas that was flared in the year 2021 was put at productive uses, that would have been 1,800 terawatt hour. 1,800 terawatt hour is the amount of energy produced in sub-Saharan Africa. So how much are we venting in the atmosphere in terms of CO2, CH4, without thinking, really? So, and of course, last but not least, in many developing countries, and I think about sub-Saharan Africa above all, where the rate of access to electricity is around 50%, and especially in large urban areas, we see 60, 65, 70%, certainly there is a role on the grid. Of course, we must avoid to be locked in. We must think about how many years, but I mean, we are very happy to help at the World Bank.
Thank you. Pratima, I want to come to you because in the morning's kickoff panel, Minister Samir said we need more innovation, more technology to help with this, and you invest in a lot of technology, so innovation. Can you tell us, what is the role of innovation, and maybe a couple of things which really excite you in the matter of gas in terms of new technology?
Thank you, and thank you for the Minister for inviting me to this panel. Well, if you think about why is renewables cheap today, right? Why is EVs getting more reasonable? It's because for the past 20 years, that's where innovation capital has gone. It hasn't come to cement and steel and methane and these what we call hard to abate. They're not really hard to abate. We just haven't put our money where we needed it to go. So, and that's why 5 years ago, the OGCI set up our fund and is part of the OGCI and our LP, and they set us up to decarbonize oil and gas industry, heavy-duty transport, the trucks we talked about earlier today, buildings, the things that others weren't touching because they weren't shiny objects, but they're objects that make our world go round. So, and I'll give you an example of how quickly, and the reason to do it is because it brings costs down, it makes profitability go up, because ultimately companies need to make money. And I'll give you an example real quick. 5 years ago when I came on this job, my CEOs told me we can't measure methane. Today, our portfolio has satellites, aircraft, drones, continuous artificial intelligence monitoring. And for the Eastern Med, we have 2 of our companies, the satellite and drone, can also do measurements over oceans, which is very, very difficult because of the reflectivity. So this is a 5-year journey. It's very, very quick. Small companies can do it. But Minister, you said earlier, one size doesn't fit all, and that is very true. To penetrate into these industries isn't easy for small startup companies. So that's why our fund is very different. We don't just provide capital, we then help to get these little companies step into an ANI or step into someone else, and the OGCI companies are piloting these technologies, which is really important to mature them, right? So today I'd say technologies are available, innovation capital is coming, but we need to make sure that capital doesn't go back into renewables only. It needs to address these sectorial issues. But that's not enough. Atul. Yeah. And Atul told me I had to be very, very direct here, so I will. We do need some help from governments, and we do need some help from big operators. Procurement processes within regulations and within governments and in large companies is very slow. It's very difficult for small companies to get in. They don't have people that can go from ministry to ministry or wait for a procurement agent in a company for 3 years. So as we think about accelerating decarbonization, we need to think about the process and how we'll accelerate adoption of new technologies as well.
So I do want to come to Mr. Babaris, but since you raised the question, maybe I go to Minister Al-Mala and Minister Pilides. And I will come to you, Claudia, but how do you respond to that governments are very slow and for new technology, taking some risks? I think that's what you're saying.
Well, I tend to agree and disagree on that, and depends on which governments. So we have a great government. So anyway, for us, no, this is true. Bureaucracy in general would hinder the progress and the momentum. However, the idea of, and let me be more pragmatic, the idea of having us all here today under this thematic day of decarbonization, this means that we are really talking serious and that we really need to change. And that's why we are here all together and with different stakeholders. So you can see governments and you can see international energy companies, you can see fund, you can see the World Bank, you can see observers, I mean, we are all together to discuss openly, because before that, different stakeholders were missing from being at the table. So we were talking to ourselves. Nobody was listening to us. Now it is the time to open this dialogue, which is happening. And I think, and unfortunately, the current energy crisis worldwide has pushed to reality. And we are now really for action. And this is part of what we were talking about. That this COP is an implementation COP. So you have the right people at the right place, the right time. And they are all willing to get geared up and start implementing. Actually, they started implementing years ago, but they needed a place to showcase and to say, here we are, we have done 1, 2, 3, 4, and we are ready to continue and to improve with, get again to what Dr. Pratima was saying, we are ready to improve as industry, but with the right policies, the right engagement from the government, the right incentives in place, and so forth. But also, what we need to do is another part of what you said, Dr. Pratima, we need to avail funds also to couple with this motivation. And we cannot do alone without proper funds and proper concessionary fund. I mean, we're not talking about commercial funds, we're talking about concessionary funds and with relaxed terms and so forth. Thank you.
So I think you've given a really good answer, hopefully to satisfy Pratima. I want to come to you, Mr. Mubarak, quickly. You know, one of the challenges with gas in the eyes of people who think gas is not part of the solution is you're locking in emissions. Can you tell us about what is your thinking around that? You know, how do you address that concern?
Thank you. I think it's what's really hindering the actions is this kind of argument. Is it energy transition or energy security? What kind of energy should we use? So I think the world will need energy to survive. As Minister Al-Molla in his opening remarks said, we'll need energy to survive. Without energy, not just heat that could kill people, but also they could freeze. So we need energy to survive. We need energy to grow. We need energy to develop. The question is that how can we provide the energy in a more responsible and in a cleaner way? And what I believe is that the world will need renewables, it will need gas, it will need other sources of energy, but I think it's for the governments and for the industry and for the energy sector is to produce this in a more responsible way. And I think it is very interesting to listen to this discussion and the collaboration between the governments and the private sector. And I guess also to add to what Dr. Pratima was saying about, it's not just the bureaucracy which is hindering the action, but sometimes the governments does not know what kind of policies would encourage the private sector to work. That's why I guess maybe at the EMGF, one of the good things is that we have a very constructive dialogue between governments and the private sector. And I think this is very important to set up the right policies, the right plans, and encourage the private sector to invest more.
Thank you. So I know, Claudia, you do want to address, you got the microphone as well, so please.
They gave me the microphone.
Okay.
I didn't ask.
That's fine. Go ahead and respond to, I do have another follow-up, but please go ahead.
The
Pratima's question.
The question is always the same, yeah. Okay. No, starting from what Pratima said about technology, we talk about policy, procedure, we need everything, but then we need technologies, and we are here also to transfer our technology. Since 2014 and 2014, we invested more than 8 billion in new technologies related to the transition, only transition, and what he said is completely true. When we start working seriously with new technology on the methane emission, that is an example, we had a target to reduce starting from 2014 to end date to 2025 of about 80% in 80% of the methane emission. In 2019, we reached 80%, and today 91%. So that means that with the right technology, you can go very fast. Now there is, we accepted the global methane pledge that was established last year in COP26 to reach from 2022 to 2030 minus 30%. I think that we can do much better. So with the right technology, also if there is no subsidy, incentives, if you believe in what you are doing and you are able through your technology to be cheap and create value, because clearly if you save methane, you are create value for everybody. And that is the same in the flaring. So I think, and what we are doing in Egypt, but it's not in Egypt, in Algeria, in Libya as well, in spite of the war, and in all the countries where we work, is to apply the best technology to combine and to create transition also in the country that they have primary needs, because everybody can change also culturally if has the right motivation, right technology, and improve the quality of life and reduce emission. I think in Egypt, not because we are here, there is the minister. No, it's not for that. Huh? Also, if I go outside, I say the same stuff. We are doing a lot. No, it's true. We are doing a lot in terms not just of MOUs, because MOUs you can sign every day, and you don't do nothing. Just an MOU with the photos is waste of time. We are doing projects. Last year we reduced about 300,000 tons of CO2 in all our operations. We plan from the next 2 years to do the same with a combination of efficiency, technology, renewables, putting together all the different technology. I can talk for hours.
Well, again, the idea of this panel and this day is action, so that's good to hear. Minister Piligas, Cyprus is a founding member of EMGF. I mean, what's your vision, and how can EMGF help Cyprus in terms of its own decarbonization initiatives?
As I said earlier, I think the challenge is to really marry up energy security and affordable prices with sustainability, and that really is something that the EMGF can do because it places gas in a very central, at a very central role. Just a point on what was previously said, I firmly believe that governments are not investors. So governments are not going to go and invest in a project because that's not what they do in a free market. But they can facilitate the right type of investment, and in doing so, that's when we get to where we want to be. And I do agree that certain sectors have been sort of vilified in a way, and because they've been vilified, everyone's trying to, in some sense, greenwash as well, because we're not seeing, as Claudia said, we're not necessarily seeing a lot of improvement in the figures. We're just seeing a lot of headlines of, this is what we should be doing. So if we actually want to implement action and make progress, we need to be investing in areas where there are weaknesses and not necessarily pretending they're not there and wiping them out. And that's a crucial thing that we need to do if we want to ensure energy security, because energy security is not going to come with the wave of a magic wand. It's going to come with, unfortunately, still the use of fossil fuel within the energy mix. So we have the choice of making that fossil fuel more environmentally friendly, or we have the choice of just maintaining it and kind of saying that we're going to reduce it in some way. So definitely, I think that we do need to be looking at what types of investments can make these, and what kind of technologies, as was said earlier, can make these activities more sustainable and actually officially sort of introduce them or include them in the decarbonization initiatives. So it's, we often think of decarbonization as already being decarbonized, whereas we need a trajectory to get there.
So I know some of you will have to leave. So Minister Al-Mola, could you also talk about this sort of enablers, which can accelerate things, and what can governments, or maybe here in Egypt, what are some of the enablers from your perspective?
Well, enablers, I think we've covered some of them here, and we have to talk about technology and availing technology together with fund. And this is something very important because we all have identified the problem and we have also the solution, but we need to implement. In order to implement and to accelerate the transition, I think we need to work both. We need to avail funds, we need to avail technology and the right policies in place. Communication and partnership among countries and among partners, whether government or public or private, is there. And I think there are synergies. And with the different challenges that we have, innovation also accelerates. And I think that we have progressed very much over the last few years in renewable. And we can see now the technology has availed very cheap renewables vis-a-vis generating electricity vis-a-vis normal fossil fuel. So I think that, and I believe that within the coming few years, we will see an escalation and a rapid evolvement of technology. But again, we need to avail funds. We need to have policies that is really incentivizing the private funds and the private companies to excel. Other than that, I think we have paved the way. I mean, everybody is aligned.
Thank you. Mr. Puliji, your World Bank has I'm going to read it correctly, $75 billion. That's a lot of money, by the way, in your portfolio on infrastructure and energy. So what do you see as the role of World Bank in this kind of decarbonization journey?
Thank you so much. To be fair, the World Bank has been in this area in the last 20 years through a fund which is called Global Gas Flaring Reduction Partnership. So the fund has always been used for many reasons. By the way, most of national oil companies or international oil companies and countries are part of this fund. And this fund has been working very much into, let's say, 2 or 3 areas. One of them is detecting what it was the amount of gas vented or flared using the geospatial tools that Pratima was very rightly referring to, policies, incentives, disincentives. Actually, it would be great to have more of a standardized set of policies about gas flaring and venting. So a lot of things like that, and obviously trying to help all governments and companies, and especially medium-sized companies in this. The idea that the GGFR will become more and more operational in these years to come to decarbonize this sector. But we have already done operations as well. Last year, the World Bank Group provided $360 million to the government of Iraq in order to reduce venting and flaring in the sector in Iraq. So the idea is to be helpful, not only with money, because I do acknowledge that big companies do have money, but smaller companies, for example, and also, by the way, be able, for example, to help in detection, certify, and all this kind of activities. So really very much happy to be in this area.
I mean, it should be noted that, the global methane pledge, you mentioned, Claudia, some of the big countries, big methane emitters have not quite signed it, right? So that's part of the challenge. I'm going to open it for questions in about 4 minutes, but before we leave, you all leave, can you say a little bit about number 1, 2 priorities for the EMGF initiative, and what will be success for you?
Yes, so I think we have 2 main goals at the EMGF is we want to put things into action. So that's why one of our priorities is to have a plan for the next 6 to 8 years. How can we decarbonize the gas facilities in the region? And also we are trying to set up the policies and align the policies between the governments to enable the implementation of those plans.
Thank you. I'm going to open it up to questions, and we'll leave. You can all stay. You don't have to leave yet. But when you have to leave, so maybe the 3 people who will leave are the ministers and Mr. Mubarak. So if you have a question for them first, and then the others will stay until the end of the panel. So you have a question, sir? Can you also introduce yourself?
Thank you. Well, actually, I don't have a question. Being probably the youngest person in this hall that has been in the energy since 1962, and I'm the head of the Energy and Climate Committee in the Senate House. So I just want to say something, please, I've been watching, listening, please, zero carbon is the sun. Zero carbon is when we succeed, as the science succeed, to accelerate hydrogen electron to hit another hydrogen electron and generate power. This is far-fetched because we have an accelerator in CERN, we have one in the United States in Texas, and China is making another one. So what I'm saying is, like I say, I'm expecting in my future, the next 50 years, I'm going to have to live with fossil fuel for most of the energy I need. That's a fact. The reason is that the world economy is built on the fact that we use fossil fuel. So we don't want the people to think, as a matter of fact, I visit countrysides, I talk to my people, they're asking me now to, instead of His Excellency, the Minister of Oil, they say, please, we don't want gas, we want green hydrogen in the country. So this is the expectation of people. They read the rest, so they think that in the near future, they're going to have hydrogen as a substitute for the butagaz and butane and the gas oil, which when you raise the expectation of the people in a country, then that's very hard. That's pressure on the government. So let's talk to the fact, consider the fact that I've been taught that the most successful cooperation investment, cooperation is Tom and Jerry. They have been successful a century now, and probably they will succeed in another century. Why? Because there is no victory. There's no clear victory. When a clear victory, one is going to have a very clear victory, the joint venture will. So energy and decarbonization and clean air and all this, we have to work hard on it. But let's be careful about investing too much because money is limited. Money resources are limited as much as gas is limited also. Thank you very much.
Please make it a brief question, yeah?
Thank you very much. Philip Trotter, University of Oxford. I just wanted to ask quickly how the panel reconciles the things that have been said with the 1.5 degree goal that has been agreed at Paris at COP21. So there is, of course, the International Energy Agency has said that we can't have any more substantial investments into fossil fuels, and I've heard some of the arguments being put forward, but of course carbon capture and sequestration does not yet work at scale. The methane leakages have been a problem for quite a long time, so I struggle a little bit to see how we can reconcile, as the minister was saying, the energy security and keeping this goal alive. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Claudio? Yeah, please. There is a microphone right there.
Yeah, clearly, the more difficult question is for me. No, I think that you are right, because we have to solve the equation, but it's a worldwide equation. And each company has I talk about company or countries, but I have to talk about my company as I think the need and is a must for our company to get this kind of target. We presented 3 years ago for the first time this target that is net zero by 2050. Then we improve. And how we can reconcile is that we have to reduce our productions. We have to oil, and that's what we have done. So we say we have a peak oil by 2025. Then we decrease the oil component and we increase the gas component, reducing what I said before. But then the production is going down, clearly. We have to introduce new vectors. For that reason, our aim is to introduce new vector that can replace gas and oil. But that is for our company. We are not using coal, fortunately. And in the last presentation of our strategy, before we had 2050 is too long, so we put intermediate target, so 2025, 2030, 2035, 2040, and 2050. And we introduce target not just for scope 1 and 2, but scope 3. That is essential. So we have target in 2030 for scope 3, minus 35%. Then by 2040, minus 80% of scope 1, 2, and 3. Scope 3, sorry, because scope 1 and 2 will be out completely in two steps, 2030, 2035. So clearly, it's not enough. We have to take commitment, not just like that. Our commitments are certified by a third party. We put the remuneration of our manager, 35% of the remuneration now is on the target of scope 1, 2, and 3, and also our financing. So we have a sustainable linked bond that we go public, and our financing is linked to the commitment 2025, 20, and all the target. So if we have a bond of 5 years, 10 years, if we are not able to reach the commitment that we presented from the non-financial disclosure, we have to raise our cost of money, we have to pay more interest, so there is a penalization. So the technology, clear target, talking about what is your curve is not something that is going down the last 10 years, but is going down immediately. That for a company is essential. For a country, it's more difficult, or for a continent, or for aggregation of country, because they give targets, but then how they can impact the behavior of the companies. Because in Europe, we are very tough and clear on our target, but then we have to follow up the company, otherwise we have a carbon leak. A carbon leak means that the company go outside where there is no, it's a loose regulation, and they can do what they want. So ETS, so the carbon price for our emissions, the ETS is in Europe. We try to expand ETS in another country. Some country has a ETS, a sort of tax on CO2, but it's very little, Canada and other company. So there is no big producer of CO2. They are not accepting a carbon tax or an exchange or a stock exchange to pay your credit. So that is I can answer for my company how to reconcile all these initiatives from a worldwide point of view is not easy, because the behavior of each country and each company is different. That's what I can say.
Thank you, Claudio. Pratima, before you go forward, there is one more question. So let's take a very quick question and a short answer to that question, as well as what you want to add, Pratima.
I'll be really quick. Jared Gallagher, energy leader for EY. It's a really quick question to Dr. Pratima, actually. Acceleration in technology around decarbonisation is the key for the energy transition. We heard Schlumberger speak about that earlier. What needs to be true to give more money to accelerate the clean tech in our industry?
So in the last couple of years, enormous amounts, I think it's 60 billion, I probably get the number wrong, 100 billions have been raised in private capital for decarbonization. The real question is who is going to work on the hard problems and how much of that is going to continue to go to renewables, which we've already done. And I'm from the wind industry, don't get me wrong. Did wind and energy storage before, love it. Not the point. And working on the harder problems here. And the reason it doesn't go here typically is most investors are not engineers who've lived in these worlds, right? So you can give capital, but they don't know how to transform that into adoption. So if you want to ask what's the real question, I think is how do you drive adoption? How do these big companies, big countries drive pace? Because I'll tell you, I work with 11 big ones and we're slow. Right? So it's about driving adoption. The minute you adopt, new innovators, more private capital will come in, but we're not seeing the adoption we need to get to. But just to answer the Oxford question, I don't think you asked the full question. There are other points we have to take into that, which is the decades it takes to change out infrastructure, right? And why do we have those decades? And what do we need to do in the short term to make that capacity? Because there's a time value to carbon. And that's what this methane journey is about. That's what this journey of cleaning today's energy stuff is about. And the reason I bring this up is I come from the wind industry. For the first 30 years, we went from 3 kilowatts to 3 megawatts, and we watched blades not fall off, right? And then the next 30 years, we're now slowly getting into offshore wind. It just takes that long to do something that large safely, especially all over the world. So we do have to do both we have to look after today's world as well as plan for the future.
Thank you, Pratima, for that optimistic view of the future. I want to thank this panel because and thank you for giving us a high-level overview of the EMGF. Minister, did you want to have a last word? I'm happy. Please, go ahead.
No, thank you. I say we are right on time.
Okay, all right. If you're really interested in more about EMGF, there'll be a follow-up session, and then we will continue with the theme of action and implementation. This is the implementation COP, as the Honorable Minister said. So, and please, thank you to this panel.
only one who hasn't had any photo with us. Can I have?
لا decarbonization. parallel مع القاعدة كنا already معاكي هم بيقولوا بصي already decarbonization اللي وزير اتحرك دلوقتي ممكن دي بس اديني دي
هو كده انهي الوليه اللي واقفه اللي لابسه ازرق sorry I'm so sorry I'm so sorry اتفضلي حضرتك
ايه ده هو قال لك؟
ماشي
اوكي
تشتميني؟
تقولي لي EMGF انا عارفه انت انا لقيتك ماشي بتجري اقعد جنب صاحبتك اهي يعني كان عايز يهرب وحشني مين اللي موجود؟ احمد رضا؟ بكلمك بقول لك مين اللي مسؤول هنا؟ احمد رضا؟ احمد رضا؟
لا فك
باشمهندس اتفضل.
انا هقعد 6 وانا هقف.
ليه هم 6 ومفيش كرسي؟ طب بص ايه، نطلع كرسي من دول. اسمع بس الكلام اهو كرسي، هم 6 وادي السابع. ليه تقف؟
سيبي لي كرسي هناك كده على الجنب، لو قعدت شويه بس خليني.
كرسي اهو براحتك. ايه؟ تاني ليه؟ بوديوم. اي بوديوم ده؟ ليه؟
عشان السيشن الجايه السيد الوزير عمل اناونس بتاع الانرجي افشنسي عنده كله.
او
ايه؟ اصل لسه يا احمد يعني في مؤتمرات شغاله اوريدي.
طب صوريني بنفس الصوره بقى. معلش صورينا احنا الثلاثه. يا نهار ابيض. وانا اعتقد ان
Questions are confirmed, right? So I have...
Your team wrote the questions. You should
So-
be confirmed.
We are very excited about this work, and our
Absolutely.
partnership with EBRD is absolutely. You're the first. You're the first to make it local and make it happen. So. Yep, absolutely. This is the reality. I would say.
We will say this a lot. I mean, we keep saying it.
فين الاماكن؟ عاوز فين الاماكن؟ خلاص ام اوت برضه؟ لا مفيش اماكن ام اوت. لا في احترام للمواضيع. لا 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 انا ما اقعدش على كرسي كده. ايه في ايه؟ لا ما ينفعش، لازم الاول تبقى قاعده مع كتف الاول.
Silio, can you stand with me to do the presentation? And if, because this one, yes, this is for Dr. Sharif. Okay. So you will do the presentation with me. هو قاعد غلط، اتفضل.
كده غلط، كده غلط.
لا ما لحقتش. اديني فرصتي بقى. نعم.
So I'll do the intro, and then you will start with the presentation, right? Ready? Go.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's a pleasure to have you all here. I know this is a very intense day, and we're discussing the most two industries that are related to the decarbonization, of course, oil and gas included, and the manufacturing industry. Within the manufacturing industry, we're focusing very much on how to move forward on specific sectors that we know that through the decarbonization process, we will be able to cut a lot of the emissions that are currently going on. So we had the steel in the morning, and now we'll be discussing the fertilizers industry. Moving from the fertilizers industry, from COP26, we know there was a global roadmap that was actually initiated, and we are very proud to announce that Egypt is the first country to have its own roadmap in implementation of the global roadmap. I don't want to take much of the opening time because I know this is a very rich panel and we have a very high esteemed panelists on board. So I will leave to my friend Ausilio, who's been working on the Egyptian roadmap with, of course, EBRD and IFA. Ausilio.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Ahmed. So, good afternoon, everybody. I'm Ausilio Bowen. And today we are here to discuss a vision for a low-carbon and climate-resilient pathway for Egypt's nitrogenous fertilizer industry. So I am representing E4Tech and our parent company ERM. Together we developed net zero and decarbonization strategies for clients across sectors of the economy. And we help implement those strategies. Perfect, thank you. So we have developed this initial vision for the fertilizer industry together with Egypt-based consultancy Environics and also with the very valuable input of the industry and government stakeholders. Can we move on to the next slide,